Hey, you found the Midwest Motoring Podcast. We're an automotive podcast about just about, well, everything automotive. From news, reactions, reviews, and everything and anything in between. We're kind of like one of those long road trips you take where you get lost and you don't know where you're at, but suddenly you find where you're going and you look back fondly on that journey and go, that was half the fun. So come along and enjoy the ride with us. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Midwest Motoring Podcast. I'm Matt. I'm your host. I'm joined today by Jess Myers again. He's our co-host. But we're also joined by another friend, a James Fisher of Hagerty, and we're going to talk to him in a little bit. We're going to get to know him. We're going to get to know what he does at Hagerty and kind of what he is as a car enthusiast, as well as talk about some really great things like the top 10 auction results from Pebble Beach that just got completed. We'll talk about the new Nissan Z, and we may talk about some real big industry news here too. All that and more on this episode of the Midwest Motoring Podcast. We'll be back right after this. All right, so guys, we are joined today once again by Jess Myers. Jess, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, as always.
It's nice to have more people to talk to than just the empty void.
Yeah, you know, talking into your own head, not always the best.
It's really bad when it answers back. And we're also joined by James Fisher. James, thanks for joining us, man.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
James, I'm glad you could join us. So you are a Hagerty employee, which is, I mean, there's a theme here, but you're an automotive enthusiast advisor too, right? Did I get that right? And you're also a big car nut.
Absolutely.
So why don't you talk a little bit about yourself? Tell us, who you are.
Yeah, so I, as you mentioned, am an automotive enthusiast advisor, much like Jess, just a little more handsome.
It's debatable.
To each their own.
It's a good thing that we're a call center.
He is married, though. I'm not.
Yeah.
Clearly, he's freshly married, just as of last Friday.
That's
so
it.
Congratulations to him
you.
and the
Thank
missus.
you. As far as my background, I have an automotive degree. I've got an associate's degree in automotive technology from University of Northwestern Ohio. It's a pretty big automotive school. They do all sorts of good, automotive, diesel, tractors, you name it. They even have a cool high performance program and own a racetrack, which is kind of neat.
Wow. So when we said you're a car nut, it's like you're actually probably the biggest car person in here, at least most qualified car person.
Like probably the most certified. Car person.
You weren't lying when we were taking a ride in that Daytona, and you're like, this thing's tune seems off. I could probably tune this with my laptop. I have a laptop, Matt. I'm like, I don't know.
I probably could. I don't know. Never done it, but I'll figure it out. It's kind of my mentality is, hey, you try something and you always do something for the first time once. So, but yeah, I spent some years working as a mechanic for a forklift company. I've done all sorts of odd automotive jobs, been in parts stores, parts departments, dealerships, just been in love with cars since I was a kid. Fell in love with playing like racing video games.
Okay.
Grew up playing like Forza, that's my favorite, and even like Project
Gotham.
Gotham.
Project Gotham.
Project
man.
Gotham. Those were the days.
I remember when you could make the garages full of all the cars you had,
Uh-huh.
and like you just had that big building. I'd walk around it for like hours, just like finding cars, and then that test track. Oh, that was such a good game.
See, personally, my favorite has always been Need for Speed Underground 2. The customization on that was always
that was a really good one too. I think I was a lucky kid that I had like an Xbox and a PlayStation, so when there were like Gran Turismo, like I got to play that, and when Forza came out, I played that, and yeah.
So you were just spoiled.
I was definitely spoiled.
I was too. I had all three. I had the GameCube. I even had a Dreamcast.
I didn't have that. That thing was
that's
weird.
getting a little too much. There,
Dreamcast was cool, but yeah, I mean, so we can definitely talk about racing video games too. That's a cool topic that we haven't touched on, but I think all three of us are really big into racing and gaming and stuff like that. So you got into gaming, you did that. What else? That's really open, so I'm sorry. That was just give me everything, James.
Yeah, heck of a host, heck of a question. I love racing. I'm a Ford guy. I love Mustangs.
Okay.
So being a Ford guy, being a racing fan, big into like the history of Le Mans.
Okay.
Used to watch a ton of NASCAR. Just love the hobby. I go to a lot of car shows. Some of my favorites are Good Guys in Columbus, and then Autorama in
that's
Detroit. That's such a good show. Lots of high dollar cars and lots of cool builds. So.
Yeah, which is interesting because we just talked to Jess last week, and you were talking about like your experiences at concourses and stuff like that. So it's interesting that your idea of a car show and his idea of a car show, I mean, yes, we understand that they both exist, and we're not silly to go, no, it's just this or that, but it's like we'll have expertise and input from kind of two different camps, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, and I'd love to get out to some of those concourse shows someday. I just never had the opportunity, so hopefully soon I will, but for now I just love going to the local shows and more of a grassroots kind of thing.
You're at the right company if you ever want to attempt to go. They'll definitely try to get you out there working either like the Concours of the Americas, Greenwich, Amelia, Pebble, and Haggerty's partnered with a lot of those. They're doing a lot of crazy stuff recently.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw in the news that they acquired the McCall Motor Works, which
did they really?
Is a pretty cool show. It's basically the starter night of Car Week for most people. You go to an airport and there's private jets, a DJ, and lots of really, really high-end cars. So pretty cool event.
Those hangar parties are really sweet.
Yeah, so very cool acquisition for Haggerty. But you said you're a big Mustang guy. Do you have a Mustang? What's the fascination with a Mustang there?
Yeah, so I do have a Mustang. I have a 2004 Mustang GT 40th anniversary. It's black on black, 5-speed, a little bit of exhaust work. Sounds great going down the street. Just really fun to drive. I fell in love with Mustangs when I was a kid. My best friend's neighbor had a 2003 Mach 1.
Okay.
And I think
solid choice.
Yeah, and it was the blue.
Okay.
That blue color. And I think it was a 71 Mach 1 in the same garage. So just saw him playing outside as a kid and fell in love. I've loved him ever since.
So what he's really saying is that he's never driven a GM product, which is why he's a Ford fan.
Yeah, exactly. How are your feelings towards Mopar and towards GM?
I love them all. I want to be all encompassing of the hobby. I think every manufacturer's got beautiful cars. I love JDM stuff, which might be surprising for hearing someone talk about Fords, saying that they like the Nissans. Like we're going to talk about the 400.
Oh yeah.
And like some of the Mazdas and stuff like that are real cool. I think they've all got their cool cars for sure.
Well, and every single domestic manufacturer has at one point in time had a relationship with a Japanese brand. Ford had Mazda, GM had Mitsubishi, right? They're all playing in the same pond,
Yeah, and there was necessity back in the 70s and 80s. All the Japanese manufacturers were thriving, and the domestic manufacturers, they had to do something.
I mean, for crying out loud, I think it was Yamaha had their hands in the Show Taurus motor.
They sure did.
So, there's a lot of different things going, and you can't, if you say, oh, I only like American, I hate to break it to you, but a lot of those parts are not American parts, or they weren't designed in America, or, it's all the same pie. We're all eating the same pie.
Yeah, it really does seem we're to a point now in automotive technology and what's been developed that really everyone's kind of piggybacking off of each other. I mean, you're exactly right. Back in the 70s, it was necessity to get more of the smaller engines where they could crank more power with more economy because they were forced to based on the regulations. So you're right. I mean, there's influence all over from every other brand. And
I think more so they were actually influenced by the buyer. Right? People started buying the Japanese, efficient car versus the American big boat. And yes, as much as regulations did change, I think the final nail in that coffin really is the wallet, right? People using their wallet as a voting thing and saying, nope, I'm going to buy the inexpensive, easy to buy and fuel Honda, and then that's why we have Honda today. So... Well, dude, what else can you tell us about your automotive history? Have you done any racing ever?
Yeah, I actually not much formally. I did my only time on the track. I did the Richard Petty experience when I was 18. So that was fun. Got to drive a NASCAR at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Unfortunately, I haven't really had the opportunity to drive have my own race car, but that's more a money thing than anything.
It's you can always just go get a rental car, and rental cars are the fastest cars in the world.
Rental cars are the fastest cars in the world.
For
sure.
Well, we wanted to talk. I mean, we got a couple cool topics. I think the most I wouldn't say pertinent, but the one that's kind of still in people's minds in the automotive world is, Pebble Beach was just last week. There was a lot of great things happening in Pebble Beach. Of course, every year there's amazing auctions. And so Haggerty, Andrew Newton, has compiled a top 10 list of vehicles sold at the auctions back there in Pebble Beach. And I figure we could go through this list and just talk about some of the things that we've seen, some of the things that caught our eye. We'll just start right at the top. I think there's a fantastic car. It's a 1963 Shelby Cobra 289 RMP Roadster. So this one was sold by RM Sotheby's. It sold for $4.1 million. That thing,
wow.
Yeah, it's bright red. If you've seen one of these Shelby Cobras before, it is the real deal. But this one definitely has some racing heritage.
Oh, for sure. If you look through some of the details on this one saw some seat time by Ken Miles. Anyone listening to this podcast that knows anything about Ford racing history, that's significant.
Or Bob Bondurant.
For sure.
How about the fact that it was actually driven onto the auction block this year by Ken Miles' son, Peter? How cool is that?
That's really cool.
That's so cool.
So if Ken Miles doesn't ring a bell to you, Ken Miles was one of the drivers of the famed GT40 that won Le Mans. It just helped Carroll Shelby really build those cars into the powerhouse race cars that they were. He also definitely raced a bunch of Shelby Cobras during that time as well. So this one is a Sebring Spec Cobra with a rack and pinion steering. The chassis code was the CSX2129. And apparently it brought Shelby the USRRC and SCC titles, or SCCA titles, in 1963, which is crazy. So it's an award-winning racing car.
Yeah, the other thing that contributed to that value, this same car sold 10 years ago for $2.58 million. So a pretty big increase there with this Cobra, but this one never had any major accidents, and it was a race spec,
which is cool.
Seeing a race car with few accidents is few and far between. So
the interesting thing across all of the auction blocks, and I hope maybe I can come up with one of the other lists that that Haggerty brought up, just to talk about some other cool, really crazy cars that came across the auction, is that just about every car that sold outperformed our valuation. And every time that we thought it was going to go for something like, X amount of dollars, they just blew past every single one of them. And this one included.
Yeah, we're seeing cars where I saw some of the articles saying that they outperformed the Concours level evaluation, and some of these weren't even Concours quality. They would outperform by 20 to 30% of Concours and over 50% of their actual quality value, which, seeing trends like that, it's definitely exciting for the vintage car hobby. Values are going up.
Well, and for sure, I think that's a huge trend that we've noticed within the last couple of years, and I think it's driven a lot by all these upcoming online auction sites. These were all in-person auctions that we're talking about, but you get Cars and Bids and Bring a Trailer, and the growth that those companies are experiencing with their bidding site, it's just crazy.
So I found the article that I was referring to. This is again from Haggerty.com/media, so you can go check these out as well. This one was by John Wiley, and the headline and the title of the article is Monterey Auctions Rake in $343 million, which is 37% higher than 2019. And later in the article, he talks about how some of the cars, like we were saying, just outsold the Concours level, valuing that we put on, that Haggerty put on them, kind of going into it, and then just kept climbing. One of the ones I was really watching was I think it was a 1995 Skyline R33 that was just unbelievably expensive. But we can touch on that a little bit later. But going back to our top 10 list, so what's the next one we got, Jess?
One of my favorites on the list is a 1962 Aston Martin DB4 GT Zagato. I'm a big sucker for Aston Martin, especially anything made with collaboration with Zagato. Beautiful, beautiful car. It's one of only 19 DB4 GTs that had Zagato body done for them.
Okay.
And just 6 left-hand drive. That car sold for $9.52 million.
Oof.
RM Sotheby's.
Oof.
Yeah, pretty crazy stuff. I mean, if you get a chance to look up what that car looks like, it is beautiful. Think Bond car on steroids.
Yeah, this one has more of a sloping back, kind of like the fastback look. Definitely. I mean, all of the Zagatos, right, have a more racing heritage to them. So this one was, let's see here, just 6 were in left-hand drive. That's crazy. And it previously sold back in 2005 for $2.695 million.
Cars are an investment. Plain and simple.
Well, some cars are an investment. If you have the means, I highly suggest picking one up, to quote Ferris Bueller. But yeah, some of these cars are definitely investments. And we see that, I from being in this industry, I see a lot more where these types of cars are purchased by big investment firms because they do believe that these cars are going to be worth at least more in the coming years than they are currently. And they haven't been wrong. I don't know if it's on this list, which is surprising, but my all-time favorite car, and the car that is... Oh, it is on the list. The car that is on my wish list, that if money was no option and I won the Mega Millions and had excess, this would be the car I buy. 1995 McLaren F1. So the previous high that a McLaren F1 LM Spec had sold for was $19.8 million. This one brought in $20.465 million. Every year, these cars are just...
This was the most expensive car at Pebble this year.
Most expensive.
And it's a very interesting spec.
In the sticker on this car was $800,000 back in the 90s. So
wow.
It was still an extremely expensive car for anyone to pick up. But the fact that these cars are now, 500% more than what they, previously were is just insanity. It's insanity to me. Now, this particular one had extremely low miles. I think it had
242 miles.
Yeah.
And the spec is something very interesting. It was made specifically for the CEO of McLaren, as I've read. It was finished in what's called Creighton Brown. It basically looks like a rust color, and it has a light tan and dark brown interior.
Okay.
It's
got a lot of like purpley tinge to it.
Yeah, it's a very, very bizarre color. It's gold, purple, brown, whatever you want to call it. It's very strange, and I don't think there's another one like it. And I think that was a lot of the reason why it
fetched the price that it did.
Yeah, and the fact that it had 242 miles.
I mean, the crazy thing is, and we looked at, I say we, like, because we're all Haggerty employees, but Haggerty valued this car at a number 2 condition. So it wasn't even a Concours level McLaren F1, which a lot of these guys use them. And if you ever are interested in these types of cars, go check out Jay Leno's Garage, where he talks at length and at nauseum about the upkeep these cars take, because they have modems, old school dial-up modems in them, that there's only 2 or 3 computers that can connect.
That's crazy. That's something I didn't know, but I mean, these cars are just so cool. It's the car that we all had posters of on our wall as a kid, and it's really cool to see them still.
I remember playing this. I think it was Need for Speed.
Hot Pursuit 2.
It wasn't Hot Pursuit. Well, maybe it was Hot Pursuit 2. But there was also an early Need for Speed game where also the Ford GT90 was on there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the McLaren F1 was on there, and they had the announcer talk about the car, and this is a McLaren F1 with however many horsepower. And
I mean, what a strange concept to think, hey, let's make a car with 3 seats in it.
Yeah. sit in the middle.
Yeah, center control, 3-seat.
Center steering wheel, 3-seat car. Now we see it again with the Speedtail, but...
And with Gordon Murray's new car.
Exactly, but what a revolutionary idea. And from everyone I've heard ever talk about driving in a 3-seat car that McLaren has made, they say the one thing you got to be careful of is where you are in the lane, because your mind is thinking, I need to be left. And my brain is thinking, I need to be close to the dividing line. But you're supposed to drive right in the middle of the lane. And they say that it kind of is it's a little bit trippy trying to drive them for the first time, and you can get yourself in trouble. So
it's kind of like if you have driven on the left side of the car all the time and then all of a sudden switching over to right side. I'm sure it's like the brain just needs a moment to calibrate. But they did have to change a lot of laws in the UK and the United States to allow a middle seat car, which is crazy.
Absolutely. What a weird car.
James, what do you got?
Cars on this list. I mean, there's so many Ferraris, and how could you not go wrong with a 250 GT? The 1958 250 GT Tdf sold for $6 million. I mean, Ferraris are supposed to be red, but this one's a nice light shade of blue, and man, does it look sharp. I really like this one for sure.
This is the Tour de France Automobile. Was one race. Wow, I can't talk today. One race where the company proved particularly successful. Ferrari dubbed a new competition version of the 250 GT, the 250 GT Tdf, as a sort of self-pat on the back for the Tour de France.
Very interesting that, you mentioned that Rosa Corsa, that's the standard Ferrari color. Every race spec Ferrari, anything you think of would be Rosa Corsa red. But this one's actually, you're right, it's like a powder blue.
Giulietta blue.
It's an Romeo color, yeah.
So strange. I guess even back then, you pay enough money, the manufacturer's gonna kind of make an accommodation and do a custom sort of spec for you. So that's pretty cool to see all the way back in 1958. They were already doing custom built specs on cars.
That's wild to hear Ferrari doing that though, with Enzo's track record in this time period.
I mean, you say that, but later in this article talking about the cars, that this car was made to compete in the 1958 Tour de France, and pressed for time, Ferrari delivered the car on time. However, it ignored or declined most of the owner's requests. He was understandably not pleased, but did manage a 4th place finish with the car of namesake race. It sold privately back in 2014 to a consignor who had it restored and showed it at Pebble in 2016. So, yes, Enzo still said, screw it, we're not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think I guess they got the color right. That might have been one of the only requests that they ended up doing.
Or maybe they didn't. Who knows? Maybe they looked at it and was like, wait, this was supposed to be red, not blue. Oh, you'll get the Giulietta blue.
I wonder what kind of requests were declined. That's a pretty interesting question.
Who knows?
So, like you said, there's tons of Ferraris on this list. 1966 Ferrari 275 Gtb Competizione sold for $7.7 million. So, again, one of the racing pedigree Ferraris. Oozing style and pedigree, the GTB is a rare competition version of the championed by the famous Scuderia Fittipaldi team. It's not Fittipaldi. It's Filippinetti team out of Switzerland. Jess, how do I pronounce that? Do you know?
Let's see here.
Apparently it won its class.
Filippinetti,
Scuderia Filippinetti. Finished 11th overall in Le Mans in 1967. They also won their class at Spa and Imola. Dude, Spa is an amazing track. We were talking about that last week when we went down and checked out the race simulator here at Haggerty HQ Dublin.
Oh yeah, Spa is such a fun track to drive.
Yeah. That's always one of my favorites in the racing video games.
And it's always great hearing the announcer just Spa du Francorchamps.
Francorchamps. It's like, no, that's not what that is. I don't think I've ever seen the next Ferrari on this list. It's a 1962 Ferrari 268 SP. sold for $7.7 million. Apparently, it's one of 6 of these with a shark nose V8 racers originally built. It's only the only one remaining in its original configuration, so it's a truly unique quality of a car. This thing's insane. Let's see here. What else about this? So in the 1960s, Ferrari took a page out of the book of Cooper and Lotus and started experimenting with mid-engine race cars in earnest. The Dino SPs were an important part of the mid-engine move, and aside from the placement of the engine, the SP's bodywork was another radical change for Ferrari. Created by Fantuzzi? It features low windscreen, aerodynamic nose, and a sharp spoiler at the edge of the tail. Originally equipped with a 2.4-liter V8, it was quickly enlarged to 2.6. It was used at Le Mans trials in 1962 with great drivers like Ricardo Rodriguez and Lorenzo Bandini, Mike Parks, and Oliver Gendenbien at the wheel, but apparently it just DNF'd, never finished, and later raced at Bahamas Speed Week and Sebring. Then won in 1960.
Bahamas?
Bahamas.
The Bahamas,
like down in the Bahamas
Speed
in the
Week,
Caribbean.
Bahamas. Sebring, and then won in 1964 the SCCA D Modified Championship under private ownership. So it's got some racing pedigree. It's a cool-looking car, man.
It is very odd. It doesn't look like your standard Ferrari.
It reminds me of a lot of the new the Monzas, the Monza SPs.
Yeah, with kind of the very, very roadster look with no windshield and kind
low
of
or very low, like low or no windscreen. Yeah,
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about this one and most Ferraris really is that it doesn't take a ton of racing pedigree to bring the high dollars. I mean, we were
just
talking
one
about
or
that,
two.
Yeah, we were talking about that Cobra earlier. I mean, and even the other Ferrari that it won at Le Mans, and this one was a DNF, and it's still a $7 million car.
Well, I think part of what makes that such a unique thing is even if they compete in a race, it doesn't really matter if they win. It's a race spec, so they have to do all these changes to make it race ready, and it shows the racing livery on it, and there's something collectible about that.
Is it livery or livery?
Livery?
I always thought it was livery.
I have never known, and
the world will never know.
If you know, let us know.
If you
hit us up.
Let me know in the comments.
But whatever it may be, having that paint, having that kind of it did race is just a big deal when you have a race spec like that.
It raced, but it never won a thing.
Very interesting. I realized when we were talking about that Tour de France or Tour de France 250 GT, I must have seen that car. That was the year I went to Pebble Beach.
Really?
Yeah, I was trying to look through my pictures, but I couldn't take a picture of every car at Pebble. That just would have taken a long time.
Apparently, the 90s were really well represented at this year's Pebble Beach and their auctions.
Cool.
A lot of the cars and stuff that came out were 1990s and newer era as well.
Well, even on the phones with Haggerty, I mean, we see all the time 90s are starting to be more and more collectible all across the board. You got 90s big full-bodied trucks are starting to get popular.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of 90s vehicles right now. People are adding, and I mean, even stuff like the Fox body Mustangs are starting to creep up in value.
Well, I think people that grew up in that era are coming around to the point where they've got the money now to be able to afford some of these cars. And hey, I remember that Mustang from my childhood. I mean, I told you earlier in the podcast, that's the car I've got in my garage, is a very similar car to something I remember from my childhood.
Right.
So
Nostalgia is a strange drug. It really is. One of the cars that wasn't really on that list that I thought was notable, I definitely thought, well, I should have known that a notable car like this might not sell, but it was that 917K.
Yeah, the Golf liveried 917K.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was one up for sale, and That one was crazy because
didn't it get almost up to $15 million?
I believe it was close, if not over 15 million, but it didn't actually sell. So I guess the reserve was set higher than that, which
clearly
that's a wild thing to me to think. It has to at least get 15, but I wonder what that reserve was set at. I know sometimes those can go anywhere 15 to 20 million, so maybe upwards 17 to 20 million they were hoping to get, which that's a lot of money.
That's always some life experience I'd like to have. I think about that watching like Barrett Jackson and other auctions when a car doesn't sell for $4 or $5 million.
It didn't sell.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Yeah,
didn't get what I was looking for.
I didn't need $14 million today. Sorry.
Didn't get what I was looking for. Oh, well.
Which, I mean...
Take it back home.
How do you think that plays into it? Do you think that negatively impacts the sale later on, or do you think that might also fuel the sale later on?
It's always interesting, especially with this year, the 917 being a feature at Pebble Beach. You'd think there'd be a lot of hype surrounding the 917. So I was really curious to see, or I guess interested to see why that didn't sell. They had about 10 or 12 of them all represented at Pebble for the feature. And, yeah, to see one not sell at an event where that was like a huge deal, that's a great question. I don't know if down the road that's going to be like, oh, well, it didn't sell then for this amount, so it's not worth that much. Or, these might just keep going up and it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, I always kind of think about it like that where, it didn't sell for $14 million, so clearly the value on this is higher. And, maybe not because they only went to $14 million, but you got to think that if someone was going to pay $14 million for a car and they really, really want it, that maybe next time they might offer 15.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Who knows what happens? They might just chuck it back in an auction next year and see what it does. You pay a little bit of fee and see kind of. At that point, it's no big deal. You toss it back in and hope someone buys it next time.
For sure. Are there any other ones, James, that you caught your eye?
Let me see. Like we talked about the Aston. I always love a good Aston Martin. I think this 28 Mercedes, this is probably one of the more unique cars on here. It's a pre-war car, obviously. And it's always fun to see the designs on those cars from that era because almost no two are alike. That's pretty well into the coach build era. It's not really going to be something that you're going to see another one of these, the same. It does say that they did sell 146, but not all of them survived. They're just such beautiful cars. They're almost like, the old school like Disney villains cars, like Cruella de Vil. You think she's going to be
like
driving
a Accord or Duesenberg?
Yeah.
They're kind of big.
Yeah, they're definitely big, but they're also small, right? Like there's not much space in the inside, but I'm looking at the picture of this thing and like
it looks 10 feet longer than it could be.
Yeah, the front in front of the windshield there's like 10 feet. They definitely don't build cars like this anymore.
No, style alone is just oozing out of these cars for sure.
You have bronze-looking wheels. You have bronze pipes coming out of the engine, and that you can clearly see out the side of the car. It's a beautiful car. Everything's black leather, and you're right. They definitely, the craftsmanship of something like this, you don't really see much anymore.
No, you really, really don't. Oh, here it is. The other one that really caught my eye was the 1995 Nissan R33 Skyline GTR, sold for twice the auction high estimate and 91% above its condition and appropriate value. And I don't see the value that they put on it though. But yeah, I saw this one come across the auction block, and at one point I blinked and I looked back and I was like, oh my gosh, what is that at? How much are people paying for this car now?
Well, it's crazy because it started with R34s just going crazy in the market on things like Bring a Trailer and just seeing these things reach close to 500,000. And now we're starting to even see that trickle down into R33s and R32s, which for a while were actually fairly affordable imports.
Stop buying R33s. Just stop. That way I can buy one.
Yeah, please stop making these cars go crazy. What was it, a couple months ago, the Midnight Purple R34?
Oh, gosh.
That car was beautiful.
I think it, 425,
Yeah.
419,000, something like that.
Now, the Midnight Purple was a rare option, and it was a
It's one of the only legal.
Right. Well, and it's also a V-Spec.
Yeah.
Right? A V-Spec NER 2, I think it was. So it was basically like the pinnacle GTR Skyline before it just became known as GTR.
And it's U.S. legal, at
That
least
is
for show
awesome.
import law.
Speaking of Japanese domestic vehicles being imported and different companies that we'd like to see bring stuff, we're already on Nissan, so we might as well bring up the new Nissan Z.
It's a solid transition.
It was okay. I kind of bobbled it. It was like there, and then I kept it going, and it was like beating a dead horse. Just stop.
The Nissan Z, yeah. I mean, we just came out with the new Nissan Z. They came out with the concept, maybe 6 months ago?
The 400 Protoss.
Nine months ago. I think at Geneva, they might have unveiled that.
It was really cool.
And looked awesome. The front looked awesome. Everything about it. Everyone was like, wow, that's a really cool car. But yesterday, they actually unveiled the production spec. And the back looks awesome. That's my favorite part.
The crazy thing about the production car as compared to the 400 Protoss prototype car, they almost look identical.
Mm-hmm. They kept a lot of the same styling. You're right.
Yeah, the side profile is really, really close, if not identical.
I really think that they were 90% of this car was like, yep, we're going to do this. And then they're like, hey, we're not quite done.
More of a tease than a prototype at that point.
For sure. I mean, so we talked a little bit about this on one of our older podcasts. And I mean, the car has a lot of great pedigree. It has a lot of great features. And I'm so excited to see a lot of them. Now, the only thing is you don't get like that 3D light effect in those tail lights, or at least it doesn't look like you do. But that's just an aesthetic. But still has the katana blade.
Yeah, it's so cool to see, though. Like, you look at it and you see 300 or 280 ZX kind of rear end. I mean, it's got the really flat rear end. It's so cool that they kind of went back into that homage to the originals there. I mean, as far as the equipment, though, it's a serious car.
Oh, 100%. So, speaking of equipment, like you said, the engine, what is it equipped with, James?
It is a twin-turbo 3-liter V6. It is the same engine found in the Infiniti Q50s. It's always nice seeing, save some money on the R&D cost. Just get that 400 horsepower in there and let it rip.
Interesting. So, it's an existing power plant.
Mm-hmm.
Does the other Infiniti already make 400 horsepower? Do we know?
I don't believe the Infiniti. I think it's called the Red Sport. Is close, maybe mid threes.
I thought they made like almost 500 horsepower.
The Infiniti. I think that's the Q60.
The
Q60 Red Sport.
I'm sorry if you're an Infiniti, like either if you work at Infiniti or you're an Infiniti fan, your naming conventions make no sense.
But the Red Sport Q60, yeah, it's a beast of a car.
A quick Googling found 400 horsepower for the Q50 Red Sport.
Okay.
I'll tell you what the Red Sport doesn't have, though, is a 6-speed manual transmission.
Oh,
Thank
music
God.
to my ears.
Yep.
I also heard double wishbone suspension.
Ooh, that's race car stuff right there.
Exactly. That's going to be a great track car.
I mean, the pictures paint an amazing photo of these cars. Like, everything looks like it's been touched. Everything looks like it's been scalped. And it looks completely new. And if you've been in like a 370Z, you know that like, hey, the inside kind of looks like a 350. And the outside kind of looks different. And hey, guess what? Probably has about 370 horsepower. woohoo, But this one actually looks like they did a really nice redesign of the inside. And obviously, we've been talking about the outside features. You got a lot of 280Z in there. You got a 240 nose. You got a 300ZX rear end. Like, this is a huge homage to, we were talking about it just a little bit ago about the nostalgia drug, right? They're pulling at a lot of heartstrings with this one.
Well, I think that's also evident by them not putting a number with it. It's just the Z. It is encompassing all that comes with the Z cars. So you kind of get the best of all Zs. And you're right. It is now we're to the point where tech has advanced quite a bit since the 370 and the 350. So I think it was due time for a little bit of an interior upgrade and overhaul.
Oh, for sure. When did the first 350Z come out? What, early 2000s?
98.
The 350?
Yeah, I think it was like
it would have been maybe like 01, 90, late 90s or
maybe
really early 2000s.
You can quote
the 370
me on that.
Probably.
I have a
2010s.
Drink bet on that. I'll buy you a beer if I'm wrong.
I am Googling this. This is great.
But I mean, I didn't know that they were not calling it like the 400. But that's really interesting point, Jess, that you brought up is like they're going to call this the Z because it is bringing in so many different aspects of Z's of yesteryears. Well, gosh, VR30 DDTT. I am surprised though this 3-liter V6 is only producing 400 horsepower though.
Hey, they probably want you to tune it.
Yeah, they probably don't want to release it with 500 horsepower because of emissions and things like that.
But sure.
I'm sure once, someone's going to crack that thing open or there's going to be a Nismo
It's the same
option.
thing we saw with the Supra. People say that, from factory it comes with 380 horsepower. People were taking out-of-the-box Supras, the Supra 5.
Papadakis.
Yeah, and they were putting them on the dyno, and they were getting 430, 450 horsepower.
Yeah, but that's a BMW thing. Like BMW, Audi, Porsche.
Well,
it's because they're giving you the optimal rating at the worst conditions, right? So like at a mile up in the worst conditions, this car will produce, 350 horsepower. But if you get it at sea level with low humidity, low temp, like that car is going to maybe produce, close to 480, 490. Right? But I don't think Nissan has the same track record of underestimating power. I think they're pretty accurate with their power ratings.
Yeah, I think you're right there. The one thing we see with the GTRs is they might be accurate at the stock rating, but there's a lot of headroom with those engines.
Yeah, but that's the GTR. Is this the same motor? Like, is this the same similar architecture with the, I just read it, the VR30 DDTT motor?
I mean, I know it's another V6 twin turbo.
Right, but I think it's a 3.6, right?
Yeah, it's not as big, but I think that there is going to be a decent amount of headroom when it comes to tuning. Just these cars, they always have kind of that overhead where you can kind of play with it, increase turbo size, and they're pretty well equipped to handle modifications like that.
So an interesting topic that we kind of brought up. I mean, the cars look amazing. Go check them out. Haggerty's got an article. You can find it on Motor Trend. You can find it just about everywhere and anywhere. People talking about this new Nissan Z, which I honestly think Nissan needed a car like this. Like they needed some lifeblood because
they're not very relevant anymore.
The Frontier, not Frontier. Is it the Frontier? The
pickup?
Yeah. And then the Pathfinder, which is embarrassingly so, I had
you
in
have
Pathfinder.
The Ultima and the Maxima, and that's really it.
Old Pathfinder outpaced me in the Daytona today. I was like,
no.
I made a lot more noise though, so I couldn't hear his car. But
that's what's important. No, and I mean, you got your point there is, Toyota's got the Supra, and they've even got
BMW.
Well, but they also have with Subaru the 86 twins, which
they're coming out the new one.
Yep, they're getting a refresh here. Everything's refreshing. Nissan had to do something like this.
Do you guys think that this is a desperate attempt by Nissan? And if so, do you think that that's going to play into the production?
I think it is a desperate attempt, but I think it was executed well enough that it'll still sell.
I'm surprised how
there
quickly...
There are a lot of Z fans.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm one of them. I'd love to get my hands on a 240Z. I always respected, like I had a '04 GTO, and I always respected Nissan 300s and 350s and 370s.
Mm-hmm.
Like 370s could whoop my butt. 350s, we were neck and neck, because we weighed about the same, and I had more torque than they did out of their V6. But it's back in those days of going out and seeing what your car could do on the highway. Like, yeah, you had to respect those cars, and so I've always been a fan of the Zs, and I think I'm just really surprised that it went from the 400 Proto to now being a production car.
With very little changes.
Yeah.
Very little changes.
Well, I think that's just a testament to Nissan. They've always been one of those companies that their engineering is on point. I mean, it's like Honda. Honda's engineers are top notch, and I think Nissan did a killer job, and I think they nailed it with this car.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, I can't wait to see what other kind of goodies it'll have. But like you guys said, the big ones are 400 horsepower, twin turbo V6, six-speed manual transmission. They did mention that they might have a automatic later on, but give me the manual up front. It's got all the tech and things that most people are looking for nowadays.
I saw 6 different two-tone color options, different color roof and different color body.
I mean, it's a good-looking car. Yeah. I am curious, though, what everyone thinks the price is going to be. I know you guys were kind of chatting about that today, but James, what do you think the price on this thing's going to be?
Yeah, I think Jess and I actually agree. I think it's going to be really close to like 40. Starting point's probably going to be 40,000, something like that. I mean, we'd all love it if it would be $29,995 or something like that. But there is no way you're going to get this kind of car
back
for that.
in the 300s, 350, 370, I remember when they were introduced, it wasn't 27, but I think they were 33, 34,000. So it does seem that they're making a big push of they have 2 different models. They have the performance and the sport. I think the sport could be mid to high 30s, and I think a well-equipped performance could get close to 50.
What did a Nismo 370 top out at?
48, 47.
Yeah, something in
the ballpark of 50.
See, I'm thinking this thing's going to start, maybe the S is going to start at like 50, and the Sport's going to be 60.
I mean, it's possible, but they got to compete with
Are they still
Supra.
selling the
They got to
GTR?
compete with...
Yes.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, they are. And I think if you get into 50 to 60, you're competing with the luxury brands at that point. You're competing with Audi, BMW. Not that they're not doing that in a performance way anyway, but as far as what you're getting for the money.
Well, but you're talking 2 different cars. You can't get a 400 horsepower twin turbo V6
You can get a 335
Audi.
instead of a 400,
right?
Where it's comparing. I mean, that would be like an M3 or whatever, the performance version. I mean, M2 70. So if it's around 50,000, it'd be somewhere around 20,000 less than an M2 or something like that. So yeah, there's still a pretty big gap when it comes to the performance packages. But I mean, you're right. If it is around 50, I mean, S4, S. Yeah. I mean, there's cars in that price range that you're like, I don't know if I'd take it over that.
I think something to pay attention to with that is what we talk about where this engine came from, that Infinity.
Mm-hmm.
Those start at just under 56.
And it's a luxury car.
And it's a luxury sedan.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be curious to see. I hope pricing is released soon.
I mean, how much is this is not the same car, and it's not a sports car, but the Supers are how much? 50,000?
No, Supers are, I think,
for the V6 turbo, or a straight 6 rather, the straight 6 turbo.
I think they're closer to 40.
43,190
Mm-hmm.
Base. Okay,
Base.
Name. I mean, I guess you could have market going and dealerships marking them up, but yeah, I think these are going to be $50,000 cars. I really hope I'm wrong. I pray I'm wrong.
I hope you're wrong too. I really
do. It's possible. Cars in general have just been going up steadily. I mean, you look at truck prices, and you're paying $70,000-$80,000 for a well-equipped truck now, and it did not used to be like that when I was growing up. So I think across the board, the car market, cars base prices are just going up.
Yeah, and I think a smart thing to do would be, if this Toyota Supra is 43.1, Start under that. Give your dealership a leg on the competition. You're already going directly at them with this car. Yeah. Why not make it cheaper?
Do 37.9 starting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be a huge win for them. Super sales haven't even been that good, it doesn't seem.
Really?
On the Mark V Supra. As far as what I've heard, it seems that they are not doing as well as anticipated. With as much hype as there is around the Mark IV Supras, you don't see many Mark V Supras.
Well, but I think that's also because Toyota made the mistake of that I think Nissan is not doing, at least not to my knowledge, is that they partnered with BMW and made a BMW with a Toyota badge.
Absolutely.
Because
it's a Z4.
Even if you say, well, they also made the Toyota 86, and that's the Subaru BRZ or the Scion FRS. It's like, yeah, but those cars also had, they had the DNA of some really amazing Japanese domestic markets in them.
Well, they were Toyota engineered cars with Subaru engines.
Correct. Yeah. Right. And so both companies also had say in the suspension architecture, and they're very different.
And that was very much a intentional, hey, you could buy any of these three. It's exactly the same car for the most part, and they just have a different badge or a different name with them and a different warranty.
Right.
But Toyota was like, oh, this isn't a BMW, it's a Supra. But car enthusiasts saw right through that and are like, no, that's a Z4.
Right.
It's a BMW platform. It's a BMW
with
engine.
It's slightly different body.
Yeah.
And people weren't fans because
the
Supra is a big deal.
It really seemed like, and this is being reductive, I'm sure, but it's like, if you want the coupe, it's the Supra. If you want a convertible, it's the BMW. And there's really not that huge of a difference.
We also hadn't had a Supra in 20 years. This was the re-emergence of the Supra, and we get a Z4.
I know we don't need to jump into Z4 stuff too much, but Toyota is a massive company with a lot of power in the automotive world, and I'm wondering why they decided to partner with somebody like BMW to present that, how. The other thing was they're not even splitting markets. They're not even saying hey, the Supra is this car in North America, and North America can't get the Z4, or the Z4 comes with a different power plant. It was literally
simultaneously coexisting cars under two different labels.
And I think that's why Nissan may have a win on their hand with this Z, because to my knowledge, it's not sharing a platform. Now, it is sharing previous architectures with other Infinities, but that's in brand.
It's completely different. The car as a whole, while it might not be different power plant, pretty much every other piece of the car is different. It's not a same chassis, same engine, same cockpit, same anything, with just different bodywork, which that's what we get with the Supra.
No, and that's an interesting question is, why did Toyota do that? I mean, that could probably be another episode of the podcast in and of itself. But
maybe they fired all their engineers. They're not able to make new designs anymore.
They were working on the Tundra.
See, I'm always curious because I've actually really liked Toyota's design in the last 3 to 5 years. I mean, the Camry XSE and all of these XSE cars that are coming out actually look really good. And they have such an opportunity to bring the Supra back and even open up some of the GR products that we don't get in the U.S. market.
The
Yaris GR, there's a big enthusiast market that would love to see that in the States. And then they present this Supra that isn't anything like a Supra.
Yeah, it's
not Supra DNA. It's not anything.
It's not even Toyota DNA. I mean, it's not. They've got such a motorsports pedigree, too, behind them. I mean, look at their recent success at Le Mans. They didn't need to do something like this. And, it's a curious thing.
Mm-hmm. It really is. It's like, they have all the resources. They could have built a car. They could have engineered and designed a car. Maybe it's like, well, pandemic. Well, it was even previous to that. So it wasn't even... Man, yeah, it's such a weird thing that they decided, let's just outsource this and not even put forth any effort. And in my opinion, people that own Supras love them. I get it. The new Supra is still a nice car.
It's a cool car.
But in my opinion, they ruined a lot of the heritage of the Supra with this car.
And they didn't have to. It wasn't like Fiat. Like Fiat with the 124. I mean, that's a cool platform car. You know, sharing the platform with the Miata. The styling is great. They made it look better. But, and not that Fiat's not a big company with big engineers and everything, but, you know, that felt more of a necessity, especially for the U.S. market. They didn't have that platform. They needed something reliable to get that brand out there. And Toyota just didn't have to do that.
Yeah, they have a little bit more resource when it comes to the U.S. market. They are, I don't know if they still are, but they're probably top 2 in sales in the U.S. as far as by volume.
Easily.
Yeah,
now,
Honda and Toyota.
I will say if sales are not doing super well of the Supra at the moment, they've definitely dodged that bullet, right? They have missed the bullet of like, hey, consumers voted with their wallets, and they said, well, we're not too far into debt on the development of this car because we developed
but who
it with
knows?
BMW.
It could have been a huge success if they would have designed it, and they could have missed a lot of potential revenue. And now it seems like Nissan might eat it up.
Yeah, I almost wonder if they didn't want to take too much away from like the 86 Twins.
It's possible. Who knows if they're going to make a high performance version of that?
Oh God, I hope so.
I mean, if they had an 86 GR or a BRZ STI, everyone's been looking for one for a long time, but no can do yet.
No STI BRZ for you.
Well, I mean, much like you guys were saying about the Z, is that the aftermarket has spoken. But that does bring in a curious topic of, and we can talk about this on another podcast, is what are we going to do with the EPA and all the shutdowns of a lot of these tuner companies and a lot of like aftermarket exhaust companies and stuff like that, and the EPA wanting to outlaw tuning or making they want to outlaw making standard road cars into race cars. So they want to basically kill all grassroots motorsport. I
mean, I have a friend who lives in California. He has a E90 BMW M3. At the time of when he got pulled over for his exhaust, he was running a everything stock E90 M3. And that's what we're facing. I know California is on the extremist side when it comes to car regulations, but I mean, other states are bound to follow. There's going to be people that, if you start tuning cars, if you start messing with ECU, if you put more power into your car, it's going to fail emissions. Mm-hmm. And more and more states are starting to do emissions tests for all of their newer vehicles, which, it's a slippery slope. And for a car enthusiast, it's not really what we enjoy seeing.
No, and it's a shame. And I see both sides of it. I'm not one of those guys that's like electric cars are killing the car. And I think that you can have fun with them too, but man, it's going to be unfortunate if you can't go down to Jegs and get your Flowmaster exhaust and a tuner chip or something and just make it fun and loud. So I
mean, they're already talking in Europe that like, hey, if you have a gas powered vehicle, you cannot enter towns.
Yeah.
Well, London's had what's the tax that they've got? They've had that tax for years. Where if it's
not diesel,
if you don't have a partial zero emissions vehicle, you're paying a tax just to get into the city.
I was in London a couple of years ago. Pretty much every car you see, any sedan, any sort of like luxury, is a diesel, and they offer like 55 more powertrains for each model than they do in the U.S. But it's crazy to see. You don't see standard petrol vehicles that often.
Yeah, and I think, what state was it? Was it Washington? They want to outlaw sales of, internal combustion engine vehicles by like 2035, which
California
is just
already has a date as well.
That's crazy.
There will be no internal combustion engines at all. I think it is like 2040, 2035.
That's insane. I mean, I get it. In a lot of these companies, you've got GM, you've got Ford, already saying like, hey, by 2025 we're going to be fully electric or mostly electric, and I get it. And like you said, James. Well, and like James said, electric cars can be fun. I remember getting my ass handed to me by a Tesla Model 3 with coilovers and performance brakes.
Not even ass.
It wasn't. No, it wasn't even it was a dual motor. But like the thing about it is we're doing autocross. my little Miata just could not outpower this car.
Too quick.
And because it had a low center of gravity and really nice coilovers, like, it handled extremely well. And so, other than, I don't know how he got home after, 10 runs on an autocross track, but maybe he had a generator hooked up.
Yeah, he had a Honda generator in his trunk.
Yeah, I mean, now it's like I could, with my F-150, I could haul a electric race car to the racetrack, plug it in on the way down, charge it, race a little bit, plug it in, and have it charged.
It is kind of sad to see, especially with classics. Like, hopefully they're not going to do away with kind of like, oh, if your car's past a certain age, you don't really need to worry about those emissions things because it's history. I mean, there is a lot of history in these vehicles.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why all those Japanese domestic cars now are being imported after 25 years, right?
Finally.
Yeah, it's about time. But you're right. Hopefully we still can coexist with internal combustion engines, and it's not just a clean sweep of that type of car. I'm totally fine with electric cars, but the gas noises and there's just something about it.
It's not the same thing.
I mean, we were just talking about like how I'm driving around a kit car, a Factory 5 Daytona Coupe kit car, and it's got like a Ford Racing 302 in it, and it makes a lot of good noises. But a Pathfinder outpowered me on a straight today, and I was like, how in the heck is this happening? It's because engines are getting more powerful and more efficient, as we progress, and eventually it will get to electric. I mean, I was just in my F-150 and I gunned it, and I was amazed about how quickly I got to like 60 and up. Whereas in that Daytona, it was a lot of waiting and a lot of noise and a lot of burning gas just to have it.
I mean, that's a pretty big engine.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have an Audi, and it's a 2.0 liter tiny little engine, but it's got a turbo, and same sort of thing. They move pretty quickly, and any sort of car within the last 5 to 10 years is like way smaller than its predecessors, but way more power.
Yeah. What I'd like to do is take the powertrain out of my F-150, the Power Boost, and put it into that Daytona. Like, that would be a kick butt car. So that's the hybrid engine, the 3.6 liter twin turbo.
Man, I don't know where you're going to put all that hybrid stuff in there.
Well, yeah, it would be tough, but we could find a way.
I mean, engineering is the replacement for displacement.
It is right now,
for sure. That is the truth.
Yeah, I think you have a good point there.
I think, as much as we hate to admit it, the electric car is coming. But I just, like you guys said, I hope we don't have like a future where it's like the iRobot thing where people are like, oh my gosh, that's an internal combustion engine. Explosions happened within that, and they're like, that's unsafe. It's like, yeah, I know. That's the fun. But guys, this has been another episode. This is episode 2 of season 2 of the Midwest Motoring Podcast. James, Jess, thanks for joining me today. I think it's been an absolute pleasure having both of you guys to discuss some of this stuff. But yeah, go check out a lot of these articles at Haggerty.com/media. You can see a lot of them there, so you can actually see the pictures. I know that's been a big, like, hey, you guys keep talking about these cool cars, but I can't see them. Go check them out, Haggerty.com/media. They've got a bunch of articles there. But come check us out on Facebook. We do have a YouTube channel. It's just kind of a repository, so you can get the podcast if you are just on YouTube. You can listen to us there. But yeah, go check us out on Apple. Leave a review. I always read them and try to give as much constructive criticism into these podcasts because it is growing. We are growing. So go check us out. But this has been the Midwest Motoring Podcast. We'll see you guys on the next one.
See ya.
Bye, guys.